The galaxy was vast and silent in many places, but not today. A sleek alien ship moved silently through the black void of space, its green lights blinking in patterns that only its own kind could understand. Inside, the aliens were restless. They had spent months tracking a strange signal coming from a small blue planet in the outer arm of the galaxy. That planet was Earth, and the signal was human. Humans were considered fragile, chaotic, and unpredictable by most advanced civilizations. But these aliens, tall, green-skinned, with large reflective eyes, believed they could capture one easily. "They are weak," said the lead alien Zorak, his voice echoing strangely through the chamber. "This human will be an easy study." The plan seemed simple. They would descend to the planet, locate the human, and transport him aboard their ship. No resistance should be expected, they believed. On Earth, the human in question, was far from ordinary. He was a pilot and an engineer, known for solving problems no one else could. But at that moment, he didn't even know that danger was approaching. He was hiking near a canyon, enjoying the silence, when a bright light suddenly lit up the sky. Before he could react, the ground beneath him trembled. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with every heartbeat. Mark looked up, shielding his eyes. A massive alien ship hovered above, larger than any building he had ever seen. Its lights were sharp, blinding, and oddly beautiful. And then, before he could even think, a beam of light enveloped him. He felt his body lifted from the ground, floating toward the ship as if weightless. Inside the ship, Mark was carefully lowered into a chamber. The walls shimmered with an unknown material, soft yet strong. He stood, looking around cautiously. That's when he saw them, the aliens. They were tall, slim, and graceful, in a way that humans rarely saw. Their green skin reflected the light, and their eyes were black and unblinking. They studied him as if he were a specimen. "Do not be afraid," Zorak said, his voice smooth but commanding. "We only wish to understand your kind." Mark's instincts told him that understanding could be dangerous. He had read enough about alien encounters to know that curiosity often came with risk. But he remained calm. "I'm not afraid," he said evenly. "But I don't trust Izeli." Zorak tilted his head, intrigued. "Most humans would have panicked. Most humans would have struggled or cried. But not Mark." He observed, calculated, and waited. Over the next few hours, the aliens tried to communicate. They displayed images of their world, their technology, and their culture. They asked questions about Earth, about humans, about his life. Mark answered carefully, never revealing more than he needed. He was learning too about their ship, about their technology, about their weaknesses. Then came the first test. One of the aliens, Vrek, approached him with a small device. "This will scan your mind. It will tell us if you are telling the truth." Mark looked at it calmly. He knew the device was dangerous. It could read emotions, thoughts, patterns. But he also knew humans had something many species lacked in predictability. He subtly moved his eyes and fingers, creating tiny irregularities in his behavior. The scan showed nothing unusual, nothing reliable. The aliens frowned. They were used to controlling information, controlling reactions, and controlling results. But humans were different by the end of the first day. Mark had learned enough to notice something crucial. The ship's main systems were linked to their homeworld. He saw that their energy flow, communications, and even some planetary functions could be accessed through the control panels on the ship. It was not just a vessel, it was an extension of their world. He smiled quietly to himself. If he could reach those controls, he could change the game entirely. He was a human, and humans thrived in impossible situations. That night, the aliens slept, or what they considered sleep. Mark remained alert, moving quietly through the corridors. He touched panels, studied layouts, and memorized pathways. He noticed security patterns and how the aliens responded to disturbances. Each step he took was calculated. He was not just surviving. He was planning. The aliens had made one mistake. They underestimated him. By the next day, Mark had tested small experiments. He caused minor lights to flicker, doors to lock unexpectedly, and alarms to sound briefly. Each incident drew the aliens away from the main control room, where he had begun to understand the central system. Zorak noticed, of course, but he could not predict the humans' next move. Humans were chaotic in ways the aliens had never considered. "You are clever," Zorak said finally. "But cleverness alone cannot save you." Mark looked at him calmly. "Sometimes cleverness is enough," he replied, "especially when it comes from a human." This human had spirit, patience, and intelligence. Most humans would have tried to fight or escape immediately, but Mark had strategy. He had waited, observed, and learned. And now he was ready to act. As Mark prepared his next move, the alien ship suddenly shuddered. Lights flickered, and strange signals appeared on the screens. Zorak rushed to a control panel, but it was too late. The systems controlling parts of their homeworld had been tampered with. Small regions of their planet experienced blackouts, communication failures, and energy fluctuations. Panic spread among the aliens. They had thought themselves masters, but the human was proving otherwise. Mark observed quietly, noting every reaction. His plan was unfolding perfectly. He had no weapons, no reinforcements, but he had human ingenuity. "That was enough, you?" Zorak asked, disbelief in his voice. Mark smiled. "You assumed you could capture a human. But humans sometimes capture worlds instead." The aliens looked at him in shock, realizing their mistake. They had tried to control the uncontrollable. They had tried to trap a being they did not understand. And now, the consequences were beginning to unfold. From that moment, the game changed. Mark was no longer just a prisoner. He was a threat, a silent, calculating human threat that the aliens could not ignore. The first part of their plan had failed spectacularly, and the consequences would soon ripple across the stars. Mark knew the journey ahead would be dangerous. The aliens were powerful, and their technology far surpassed anything humans had built. But he also knew one thing: humans were adaptable. Humans could think, plan, and act in ways that no alien could predict. And with that advantage, Mark was ready to turn the tables entirely. Mark had been observing the alien ship for hours, quietly learning everything he could. The aliens were intelligent, but they had one fatal flaw: they underestimated humans. They thought a human would panic, struggle, or plead for mercy. Mark had done none of these things. He had stayed calm, alert, and always thinking. Now, the advantage was shifting slowly but surely to him. The chamber where Mark was kept was secure but not perfect. He noticed a faint hum beneath the floor, and the way the walls glimmered with energy. Every device, every panel, every screen had a function. While the aliens were busy watching him, he was quietly learning their patterns. He noticed that when certain lights flickered, the guards would leave for minutes at a time. When certain alarms rang, a control panel became unmonitored. These small openings were all he needed. Mark's mind raced. He thought about his world, his planet, and the countless humans who had survived impossible odds. Humans were resourceful, unpredictable, and most importantly, resilient. He would need all these qualities. He waited for the first opportunity. When a guard left the central hall to check a minor malfunction he had triggered, Mark quietly moved toward a side corridor. His steps were silent, careful. Every movement counted. His eyes scanned the alien symbols on the walls. Though he did not understand them fully, he could sense their purpose: the lights, the controls, the energy conduits. Finally, Mark reached the central control room of the ship. This room was unlike any he had seen before. Screens displayed images of the alien homeworld, their cities, and their energy grids. Lines of light moved across panels, connecting power stations, communication nodes, and even planetary defenses. Mark realized the truth. This ship was not just a transport, it was an extension of their civilization. Control the ship, and you could influence their world. Mark's fingers hovered over the controls. The aliens had created complex systems to protect themselves, but they had never anticipated a human. He did not know all the alien symbols or commands, but he knew patterns. He noticed repetition, logic, and predictable sequences. Slowly, deliberately, he began rerouting small energy flows, creating tiny glitches that would eventually cascade across the alien homeworld. Meanwhile, the aliens were distracted. Zorak and the other guards were focused on trying to understand this human. "He is clever," Zorak admitted, frustration creeping into his voice. "But he cannot understand the true complexity of our systems." Mark smiled inwardly. Cleverness was enough. Humans had survived predators, natural disasters, and wars using cleverness alone. And this alien species had made one critical mistake. They had never faced a human like him. The first effects were subtle. In small districts on the alien homeworld, lights flickered, minor energy systems shut down briefly, and communications experienced brief delays. The Council of the Alien World noticed but dismissed it as technical issues. They could not imagine that a single human trapped aboard a ship could influence their entire planet. Mark watched the screens carefully. Each flicker, each failure, was a message to the aliens. Humans were not simple creatures. They were unpredictable and capable of thinking beyond technology. He was just getting started. Later, Vrek, the alien who had first scanned his mind, returned. "Your interference is growing," Vrek said. "Stop it, human. You cannot control what you do not understand." Mark met his gaze steadily. "I understand more than you think," he replied. "Sometimes understanding isn't about knowing everything, it's about knowing enough to act." Vrek's eyes narrowed. Most humans would have argued, shouted, or panicked. Not Mark. Mark's calmness, his calculated words, unnerved them. As ours turned into a full day, Mark's influence on the alien homeworld increased. Minor systems failed, causing confusion and concern. Cities lost power for brief moments. Communications were delayed and transportation grids experienced malfunctions. Panic began to spread among the aliens. They had captured a human thinking it would be easy. But now their entire civilization was facing unexpected chaos. Mark took the opportunity to explore further. The ship was vast, with corridors and chambers that seemed endless. He found storage rooms, alien devices, and panels that controlled other parts of the ship. Each discovery gave him more tools to use. While the aliens were focused on his supposed capture, he was learning how to control the very systems that powered them. At night, when the alien ship dimmed its lights, Mark continued his work. He studied patterns, tested small interventions, and mapped the connections between the ship and the homeworld. His plan was not reckless. It was precise. Every step he took was calculated to maximize effect while minimizing risk to himself. Then came the breakthrough. Mark discovered a panel that allowed him to send signals directly to the planetary energy grid. It was complex, but he did not need to understand all of it. He needed only to create small disruptions, just enough to confuse the aliens and force them to react. One human mind, combined with careful observation and timing, was enough to create significant impact. As Mark activated the first sequence, alarms blared. The aliens rushed to the control room, but it was too late. Small sections of their homeworld experienced power failures, and communication lines went down unexpectedly. Entire districts were thrown into temporary darkness. Chaos, small at first, began to spread. Zorak's eyes widened. Impossible. How can one human affect the systems from here? Mark did not answer. He simply watched. Humans had a saying, "Never underestimate the quiet ones." The aliens had learned this the hard way, for the first time. The aliens felt fear not for themselves, but for their world. They had thought themselves masters of logic, technology, and strategy. And now, a single human, trapped and unarmed, begun to unravel their civilization. Mark's mind raced with possibilities. He could have fled if there was a way, but the ship's systems were too advanced to allow escape. Instead, he chose a different path: disruption, strategy, and observation. Humans thrived when faced with impossible odds, and this was his kind of challenge. Hours passed, and the chaos on the alien homeworld grew. Transportation systems failed intermittently, energy grids fluctuated, and communications faltered. Panic spread among the aliens. Their carefully controlled society was in confusion. All because of one human. Zorak realized something crucial. Capturing Mark had been a mistake. They had intended to study him, to learn from him, to prove human weakness. Instead, they had unleashed human ingenuity. The human was no longer a captive, he was a threat. Mark, sitting quietly in the corner of the control room, allowed himself a small smile. He had not needed weapons or reinforcements. He had only needed his mind, observation, and patience. That was enough to start changing the balance of power by the end of the second day aboard the ship. Mark had mapped almost all major systems, both on the ship and connected to the homeworld. He had small failures cascading across the planet, enough to keep the aliens distracted, anxious, and reactive. The humans of Earth had been underestimated, and that mistake was proving deadly. Zorak turned to Vrek. "We have captured a human, and yet our world is in jeopardy. How is this possible?" Vrek shook his head. "He is not just clever. He is unpredictable. We cannot anticipate him." Mark, from his vantage point, heard their conversation but said nothing. He had no need to. His actions spoke louder than words. Humans had survived predators, disasters, and wars because of their mind and heart. Now, far from Earth, Mark was showing the same qualities. As night fell over the alien homeworld, small pockets of chaos continued to spread. Systems that were once precise and flawless faltered. Communications failed, energy grids wavered, and the aliens' carefully laid plans began to collapse. One human, using nothing but his mind, had begun to turn their world upside down. Mark knew the next phase was coming. The aliens would soon realize that their attempts to control him had failed completely. He was not just a prisoner. He was the force they could not contain. Humans had always adapted, survived, and overcome. And now, in the silence of space, aboard an alien ship, Mark was about to prove it once again. The first small victories had been won, but the real challenge was only beginning. The aliens had underestimated humans, and that mistake would have consequences far greater than they could imagine. Mark leaned back, looking at the glowing panels. His mind was alive with possibilities. One human against an alien civilization might seem impossible, but humans thrived on the impossible, and now Mark was ready to turn the next impossible into reality. Mark had been aboard the alien ship for 2 full days, and the aliens were beginning to realize their mistake. Their initial confidence that a human could be captured without consequence had turned into unease, and now into fear. He had learned quickly, observed even faster, and had begun using the aliens' technology against them in subtle, almost invisible ways. The alien homeworld was vast, with cities and systems carefully monitored and maintained by sophisticated technology. Power grids hummed with energy, transportation networks glided smoothly, and communications reached every corner of the planet. To the aliens, these systems were perfect. But to Mark, they were a puzzle, a network of patterns that could be understood and, with careful intervention, influenced. Early that morning, Mark began his work again. The central control room was empty except for a single, hovering monitor displaying the alien homeworld in miniature. Lights blinked across the surface, marking energy flow, transportation movement, and communications lines. Mark's fingers hovered over the alien interface. He did not understand every symbol, but he did not need to. He'd recognize patterns, sequences, and logic, the same skills humans had developed for centuries on Earth. He started with small disruptions, careful to avoid immediate detection. A minor energy fluctuation here, a brief communication delay there, a transportation halt lasting only seconds, tiny anomalies that, over time, would grow into confusion. The aliens noticed. Zorak's face, usually calm and collected, tightened with frustration. "The human is interfering," he said. "We must stop him immediately." Vrek, who had been assigned to monitor Mark, shook his head. "We cannot anticipate his methods. He does not act like a normal creature. He is unpredictable." Mark smirked quietly. Being unpredictable was one of humanity's greatest strengths. While the aliens relied on logic and patterns, humans relied on adaptability. Humans thrived in situations where rules changed, and they excelled in chaos. He intended to turn their world into just enough chaos to make them powerless without causing permanent harm. As the first day progressed, Mark increased the scope of his interventions. Transportation grids failed intermittently, forcing aliens to reroute their vehicles. Minor energy disruptions caused lights to flicker in cities, prompting emergency teams to scramble. Communications lines glitched, confusing officials and delaying instructions. Each small disruption seemed harmless on its own, but the combined effect began to ripple across the planet. Back in the alien ship, the crew was in disarray. They had captured a human thinking it would be simple, but now their society faced unexpected complications. Zorak called a council meeting on the ship's holographic display. "Look at what this human has done," Zorak shouted, pointing at screens showing the flickering cities and failing systems. "He is a single being. How can he cause this?" One of the council members, Zelra, spoke cautiously. "We underestimated him. Humans are not predictable. They do not follow our logic. We cannot rely on our usual methods of control." Mark listened from the control room, silent and calculating. He was learning as much as they were. Every reaction, every strategy the aliens tried to implement, gave him information for the next step. Humans had survived wars and disasters not by brute force alone, but by observing, analyzing, and acting at the right moment. By nightfall, Mark had taken the next bold step. Using the ship's interface, he accessed deeper control systems that linked directly to energy production plants and power regulators on the alien world. He did not know every technical detail, but he did not need to. He could influence output, reroute power, and create imbalances that forced the aliens to respond urgently. The effects were immediate. Cities experienced rolling blackouts, causing panic and confusion. Transportation networks halted abruptly, leaving thousands stranded. Communication lines went silent at key moments, delaying crucial messages. Panic spread among the aliens like wildfire. They had thought themselves safe, superior, and in control, but one human had changed that perception. Zorak realized the magnitude of the problem. "We cannot contain him with force," he admitted. "We must find another way." Vrek, however, had an idea. "Perhaps we can negotiate. If he wants to survive, he may cooperate if offered safety." Mark, overhearing the conversation, considered it. Negotiation might be useful, but only if it served his purpose. He knew the aliens valued order above all. Humans, by contrast, thrived in disorder, could use that to his advantage. The next day, he introduced a subtle element of misdirection. He triggered small anomalies in secondary systems, drawing the attention of alien engineers and diverting them from the primary control room. Then he made a calculated move. He accessed the planetary defense network, not to destroy it, but to make minor adjustments that would confuse monitoring systems. Alien security protocols detected anomalies, but they could not pinpoint the cause. The aliens began to panic. Transportation stopped entirely in some cities. Emergency systems went into overdrive. Power surges caused minor malfunctions in industrial areas. The council tried to restore order, but every move they made seemed to fail. Their logic-based systems were unable to predict or counteract the humans' actions. Mark realized something important. Humans had always survived not by overpowering their enemies, but by understanding them and acting unpredictably. That unpredictability was his greatest weapon. The aliens could control technology, but they could not control human ingenuity. By the third day, the effects of his interventions had reached critical areas. Key administrative districts lost power for hours. Communications were delayed, causing confusion in decision-making. Transportation grids became unreliable. The aliens had captured a human thinking it would be simple, but now they were scrambling to save their own civilization. Mark, from the control room, watched their reactions carefully. Each mistake they made taught him something new. He learned which areas they prioritized, how they reacted under pressure, and where their weaknesses lay. Every response was a piece of data, every panic a clue. Zorak and the Council realized the danger was escalating. This human, he is not just clever, Zorak admitted. He is a strategist. He thinks in ways we cannot predict. Vrek nodded. We must act cautiously. Any aggressive move could worsen the situation. He may be using our own systems against us. Mark smiled. That was exactly what he was doing. Using observation, patience, and strategic action, he had turned the aliens' strength into their weakness. They had believed they controlled the situation, but now their world depended on reacting to him. That evening, Mark noticed another opportunity. Aliens' communication network connected every major city, allowing for near-instantaneous updates. By introducing a small delay in key channels, he caused information to arrive late, forcing the aliens to make mistakes in judgment. Orders arrived too late, resources were misallocated, and confusion spread across the planet. The aliens' fear grew. They had captured a human thinking it would be easy, but now they faced the impossible. One human had disrupted their society without leaving the ship. Mark had no weapons, no army, no support, but he had something far more powerful. Human intellect, observation, and determination. As night fell again on the alien world, the chaos continued. Transportation networks were unreliable. Energy grids fluctuated. Communication lines were inconsistent. Entire districts were thrown into confusion. The aliens, for the first time, experienced true uncertainty, all because of a single human mind. Mark leaned back, studying the screens. He had not needed weapons or force. Human adaptability, patience, and strategy had been enough. He had turned the aliens' greatest strengths, their technology, control, and planning, against them. Zorak, desperate, turned to the Council. I must reconsider our approach. Capturing him was a mistake. He is more dangerous than we ever imagined, the Council murmured in agreement. They had underestimated humans. It captured one thinking it would be a simple victory. But now the consequences were spreading across their entire civilization. Mark, sitting quietly in the control room, allowed himself a small smile. Humans had survived wars, disasters, and impossible odds because they could think, adapt, and act unpredictably. Now, far from Earth, one human was proving that same truth to an entire alien species. The human strategy had succeeded beyond what even he had imagined. He had not only survived captivity, but he had turned it into a position of power. The aliens had captured him, thinking it would be simple. Instead, he had captured their world, at least temporarily, through the cleverness and resilience that defined humanity. Mark knew the journey ahead would become even more challenging. The aliens would attempt countermeasures, but he had already learned their patterns, studied their reactions, and anticipated their moves. The next phase of his plan would test not just his intelligence, but the very unpredictability that made humans unique. For now, Mark allowed himself a moment to rest. The chaos on the alien homeworld continued, but it was controlled chaos that he had created, guided, and used strategically. One human, trapped aboard an alien ship, had become a force the aliens could not ignore. And that was only the beginning. The alien homeworld had never seen such disorder. Cities once glowing with perfect energy flickered in confusion. Communication lines faltered, and transportation systems stopped functioning at random intervals. Panic spread among the alien population, and even the Council, the supreme authority, struggled to maintain control. The aliens had captured a human thinking it would be simple. They had underestimated one of the galaxy's most unpredictable forces. Humanity, Mark, however, was calm. From the ship's control room, he studied the chaos he had created. He had observed the aliens' reactions, learned their patterns, and carefully planned every disruption. They were reacting to him, not controlling him. One human mind, operating with observation, patience, and ingenuity, had turned the tables on an entire civilization. Early that morning, Mark began the next phase. He targeted critical energy grids and transportation hubs. He did not destroy anything. Humans valued life and balance. Instead, he introduced minor fluctuations and delays, forcing the aliens to react hastily. When systems failed, they did so just enough to disrupt order, but not enough to cause permanent harm. Zorak, the lead alien, was growing desperate. He paced the control chamber aboard the ship, his green skin reflecting the flickering lights. This human. He is not just clever. He is dangerous. We must regain control immediately. Rex, standing beside him, shook his head. We cannot predict him. Every time we think we understand, he acts differently. He does not follow logic. Meanwhile, Mark had identified a new opportunity. He discovered that the alien world relied on automated monitoring drones to maintain order. These drones patrolled cities, monitored energy flows, and ensured that systems were functioning correctly. Using the ship's interface, he sent small signals that caused the drones to malfunction. They hovered in incorrect positions, misread commands, and even paused mid-flight, creating confusion across multiple cities. The effects were immediate. Energy distribution became uneven. Some sectors lost power temporarily, and communication delays worsened. Transportation systems stalled, and alien officials struggled to coordinate responses. Chaos spread like wildfire. And the aliens realized their technology could no longer ensure stability. Zorak slammed his fist on the console. We have captured a human thinking it would be easy, and yet our own systems are failing because of him. Mark, observing silently, allowed a small smile. Humans thrived under pressure. Humans adapted when faced with impossible odds. And now, one human had demonstrated that even the most advanced alien technology could be outwitted through patience, strategy, and unpredictability. By midday, Mark's influence had grown further. He focused on communication networks, linking the council with regional governors. Small delays, misrouted messages, and erroneous alerts forced the aliens to make mistakes in judgment. Officials gave conflicting orders, emergency teams were sent to the wrong locations, and vital resources were misallocated. The human's mind was now controlling the flow of information across an entire world. On the ship, the aliens convened a high-level meeting. We underestimated him, Zorak admitted to the council members. One human, and our world is in disarray. Our systems are turning against us. Zelra, one of the council's most cautious members, spoke up. We must negotiate. Threatening him, or using force, will only escalate the problem. He is using our logic against us. We cannot outthink him. Mark overheard the conversation through the ship's sensors. Negotiation might seem wise to the aliens, but he had no intention of cooperating unless it benefited him. Humans were not easily controlled, and no alien offer could match the unpredictability of a human mind. Instead, he focused on the next step, expanding the chaos strategically. By afternoon, Mark targeted transportation systems again. He introduced slight delays in major routes, causing congestion, confusion, and missed schedules. Alien authorities scrambled to reroute vehicles, but every adjustment led to new problems elsewhere. Each minor error multiplied, demonstrating a principle humans had long mastered. Unpredictability and adaptability were more powerful than brute force. The aliens began to panic. Systems that had always been reliable now faltered. Officials could no longer trust the data coming from their automated monitoring devices. Entire cities struggled to maintain basic functions. The alien population, unprepared for this level of disorder, grew anxious. Mark watched all of this unfold, careful not to overreach. He was not destroying their world. He was demonstrating that humans were capable of challenging even the most advanced civilizations with ingenuity alone. One well-placed human could outthink entire species. Relying solely on technology and routine, as night fell on the alien homeworld, Mark identified a new weakness. The energy systems supporting major cities relied on a delicate balance of power distribution. By rerouting small amounts of energy from one sector to another, he could cause temporary blackouts in key areas without harming the population. He activated the plan. Lights flickered, transportation paused, and communication lines faltered in select districts. Alien authorities scrambled to restore order, but the anomalies were too widespread. The more they tried to correct the situation, the more errors appeared elsewhere. Mark had created controlled chaos, and the aliens could not stop it. Zorak, frustrated beyond measure, turned to Vrek. We captured a human thinking it would be simple, yet our world is collapsing around us. What can we do? Vrek shook his head. We cannot predict him. He does not follow our logic. Every move we make only gives him more information. He is remarkable. Mark, watching silently, considered the next phase. He had already caused temporary disruptions across multiple sectors. The aliens had shown themselves to be inflexible, relying on logic and technology, while he thrived on unpredictability. The final step would be to demonstrate human ingenuity in a way that could not be ignored, using their own systems to create a controlled but undeniable advantage. He began with communications. By subtly rerouting messages and creating deliberate delays, he caused the Council to receive contradictory reports. Some regions appeared in crisis, while others seemed perfectly stable. Officials acted on faulty information, sending resources to the wrong places. Creating more confusion, next, he focused on energy grids. Minor surges and dips affected major districts, causing lights to flicker, transportation to pause, machinery to halt temporarily. The population was safe, but the perception of chaos spread quickly. Humans understood that perception could be as powerful as reality. Finally, he targeted drones. The automated monitoring devices, once reliable, now misread commands and paused in midair, further increasing confusion. Energy distribution, transportation, communication systems were all destabilized simultaneously, but in a way that would allow recovery. Humans could strike fear and create opportunity without destroying life. The aliens were in awe and fear. They had captured a human thinking it would be simple. They had assumed humans were fragile, weak, and easy to manipulate. And now, one human had disrupted entire systems, outthinking them at every step. Mark leaned back, observing the results. He had no weapons, no army, and no direct power over the aliens. All he had was his mind, patience, and understanding of patterns. That was enough. By the end of the day, the council convened again. We cannot contain him, Zorak admitted. One human has caused more disruption than our combined forces could. We must rethink everything. Mark, quietly watching from the ship's control room, allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Humans had survived wars, disasters, and impossible odds, not by strength alone, but by ingenuity, patience, and the ability to think beyond predictable patterns. He had proven that principle far from Earth. In the heart of an alien civilization, the chaos would continue for a time, but it was controlled chaos. Mark's goal was clear. He was demonstrating the power of human intellect and resilience. The aliens would be forced to recognize the strength of humanity in brute force, but in creativity, adaptability, and unpredictability. And the most important part? Mark had only begun. The next phase would test both the aliens and his own ingenuity even further. Humans thrived when challenged. And now one human was challenging an entire species. The alien homeworld was in chaos. Cities flickered with uneven energy, transportation grids faltered, and communication systems were in disarray. The council, once confident and commanding, scrambled to respond to anomalies that appeared everywhere. They had captured a human thinking it would be simple. They had believed humans were weak, unpredictable, and easy to study. And yet one human trapped aboard their ship had turned their world upside down. Mark had spent days observing, calculating, and acting. Every movement had been strategic, every intervention precise. He had no weapons, no army, and no allies, but he had something far more powerful: a human mind. Humans survived disasters, wars, and predators because they could think, adapt, and act unpredictably. And now, Mark was proving that principle to an entire alien civilization. That morning, Mark decided it was time for the final phase. The previous disruptions had demonstrated human ingenuity. But now he needed to show the aliens that humans were not to be underestimated. His plan was simple but daring. He would use the aliens' own systems to create a controlled advantage. Forcing them to acknowledge human superiority without causing permanent harm, he started with energy grids. Minor reroutes had already caused temporary chaos. Now he amplified the fluctuation strategically. Major cities experienced brief blackouts, and energy systems oscillated in ways the aliens could not predict. Yet, Mark ensured that no damage occurred. He wanted to prove intelligence, not destruction. Next, he focused on communication systems. Using the ship's interface, he rerouted critical messages, creating contradictions and delays. Reports arrived late or out of order. Commands conflicted with one another. Officials acted hastily, often sending resources to the wrong locations. Confusion spread throughout the alien bureaucracy, yet life continued. Mark's human ingenuity had created chaos without casualties, a testament to careful strategy and planning. Meanwhile, Zorak paced in the control chamber, visibly frustrated. "We have captured one human," he said, voice sharp, "and our world is unraveling around us. How can a single being with no weapons do this?" Vrek shook his head. "He is not predictable. Every move we anticipate, he counters in ways we cannot understand. This is not mere cleverness. This is strategy beyond our calculations." Mark smiled quietly to himself. Humans had thrived for millennia by thinking beyond patterns, by exploiting adaptability and ingenuity. He was demonstrating that principle in the heart of an alien civilization. By midday, he moved to the next step. He targeted the alien monitoring drones that controlled critical sectors. These drones had always been precise and reliable. Now, he caused them to misinterpret signals, hover in the wrong areas, and pause mid-operation. The result was immediate. Transportation, energy, and communication grids became even more inconsistent. Panic spread among the population. The council realized that conventional control had failed. Then Mark introduced subtle coordination. He synchronized the minor disruptions so that they would appear as if the world was stabilizing, only to falter again unpredictably. The aliens, desperate to restore order, rushed to respond, but every action they took created new anomalies elsewhere. Humans had always understood the value of adaptability when one approach failed. Another was tested, and flexibility became strength. The Alien Council convened urgently, projecting a holographic display of the planet from the ship. "We cannot contain him," Zorak admitted to the other members. "He is disrupting our systems using methods we cannot predict or counter. Capturing him was a grave mistake." Zelra, one of the council's wisest members, nodded slowly. "This human, he is demonstrating not just cleverness, but strategy, patience, and foresight. We must recognize his abilities if we hope to survive this disruption." Mark, quietly observing, realized that the aliens were beginning to understand something important. They had believed humans were weak and easily controlled. They had assumed technology and logic were superior to unpredictability and strategy. Now, they were learning the truth. Human ingenuity, adaptability, and reasoning could rival even the most advanced civilizations. By evening, Mark moved to the next phase. He began creating small, coordinated disturbances across multiple cities simultaneously. Energy grids fluctuated, transportation paused, and communication lines faltered at key moments. The aliens were forced to divide their attention across the planet, chasing anomalies they could not fully predict. Every action they took was anticipated and countered. Showing the humans' unique ability to think beyond fixed patterns, Zorak's frustration had turned into concern. "We captured one human thinking it would be easy, yet he is controlling our world without leaving the ship. How is this possible?" Vrek replied thoughtfully. "He is not just intelligent. He is adaptive, strategic, and unpredictable. We cannot contain him using our conventional methods. This is the essence of humanity." "Mark, observing the reaction of the aliens, realized he had achieved more than survival. He had demonstrated in action what humans were capable of. Without weapons, armies, or allies, one human mind had outsmarted an entire alien civilization's systems. That was the essence of humanity: intelligence, strategy, and adaptability. Now, for the final statement. Mark used the ship to coordinate a controlled demonstration of his abilities. He temporarily stabilized a few sectors, then introduced brief fluctuations in others. The aliens could see the pattern, but could not fully predict it. Life continued uninterrupted, yet they understood that a single human had complete control over the perception of chaos. It was a display of power without destruction, a human touch. Zorak finally faced Mark. "You have shown us something we could not have imagined. One human, one being, has forced us to recognize limits in our own systems. You have captured more than our attention. You have captured our respect." Mark nodded quietly. "I did not come here to fight. I came to survive. But humans have a way of showing their worth, even in impossible situations. I only acted with observation, patience, and strategy. That is what humans do." The council, witnessing the humans' abilities, realized a crucial truth. They had assumed strength came from technology, armies, and control. They had underestimated intelligence, adaptability, and strategy, the qualities that defined humanity. One human had demonstrated these qualities more effectively than any alien technology could. By nightfall, the planet had begun to recover from the temporary chaos. The population was safe, infrastructure was intact, and life continued. Yet the aliens had learned a lesson that would not be forgotten. They had captured a human thinking it would be simple. Instead, one human had disrupted their world, outsmarted their systems, and forced them to recognize human superiority in strategy and ingenuity. Mark, finally, at ease, stepped back from the control room panels. He had survived. He had adapted. He had demonstrated the power of a human mind against an advanced alien civilization. And in doing so, he had left an impression that would resonate for generations. Zorak approached him. "You have shown us the value of unpredictability, strategy, and intelligence. Humans are remarkable." Mark smiled. "You have technology, control, and precision. But humans survive because we adapt, we think, and we act beyond the expected. That is why you could never truly control us." The aliens, humbled and enlightened, returned Mark safely to his planet. They had tried to capture a human, but in doing so, they had captured a lesson. Humans were not weak, not simple, and not predictable. Humans had ingenuity, courage, and a mind that could rival even the most advanced civilizations. Mark returned to Earth, unchanged physically, but profoundly aware of what he had accomplished. One human had survived impossible odds, outsmarted an alien civilization, and left a mark that would never be forgotten. Humans were small in size compared to the galaxy, but their minds, their creativity, and their adaptability made them a force to be respected. The galaxy would never forget the story of the human who turned capture into triumph. The aliens learned a lesson they would carry forever. Never underestimate a human. One human could change the course of worlds simply by thinking, adapting, and acting beyond expectations. And Mark? He returned to Earth, quiet, observant, and ready for whatever challenge might come next. Humans thrived on challenges, survived the impossible, and now even the stars knew their worth.